Hello friends, Tony here from TL Yarn Crafts with another fun and free crochet pattern. Meet the lovely Tony Cuffed Cardi. This is the kind of cardigan that wraps you up like a warm hug. Comfortable fitted sleeves, a relaxed body, and functional buttons. There's just so much to love about this beginner-friendly crochet cardigan pattern. Now while crocheting along with me, pull up the free pattern on my blog, tlycblog.com. And if you prefer, you can get an ad-free printable version for just a few dollars from my shop, tlyarncrafts.com. Links to both resources are in the description. If you're excited to make the Tony Cuffed Cardi with me today, be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel for even more free patterns, product reviews, and tutorials. Now let's grab our hooks and get stitching. To make your Tony Cuff Cardi, you're going to need category 4 worsted weight yarn. I used Heartland from Lion Brand, which is 100% acrylic. It comes in several beautifully heathered shades, and it's absolutely gorgeous in this colorway, which is called Petrified Forest. Here it's coming up quite gray, but in some lights it looks green, and some lights it looks blue. It's a really, really pretty multi-dimensional color. If you can't get your hands on Heartland, check out any other worsted weight yarn. In addition to the yarn, you will also need a 6.5mm crochet hook, a tapestry needle, a pair of scissors, 1-inch buttons. I use these coconut buttons that I found on Amazon, locking stitch markers, a tape measure, as well as steam blocking supplies, which I'll go over a little bit later. We'll kick things off with our back panel, and the back panel is truly the easiest, most relaxing part of the pattern, so I put it right there at the front. We're going to start with the number of chains necessary for your size, so take a look at the pattern and see how many chains you need to start with. To make our chain, we'll start with a slip knot on our hook, yarn over from back to front around the hook, and pull through the loop. That's 1 chain. Yarn over, pull through for 2, yarn over, pull through for 3, however many you need for the size that you're making. Once you've achieved your correct number of chains, we now need to work into our chains. So we want to place our first V-stitch in the 3rd chain from our hook. So the loop on our hook does not count as a stitch, so we're going to count 1, 2, 3 chains from our hook. And to make our V-stitch, we half double crochet, chain 1, half double crochet again in the same stitch. So to do our half double crochet, we're going to yarn over the hook, again finding that 3rd chain from the hook. I'm inserting just into the top loop of that chain, yarn over and pull up the loop. You now have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over and pull through all 3 loops to complete your half double crochet. Now we'll follow that with a chain 1. So yarn over, pull through 1, and then yarn over, and we're going to go right back into that same stitch, insert our hook, yarn over, pull up the loop, 3 loops on our hook again, yarn over, pull through all 3. That's our first V-stitch complete. So we have the 2 chains that we skipped at the beginning, we have a half double crochet, a chain 1, and a half double crochet all into the same stitch. We want to now skip the next 2 chains, so here's 1 and 2, and V-stitch into the following chain. Yarn over, insert into the stitch, yarn over and pull up the loop, yarn over and complete the half double crochet, chain 1, half double crochet into the same stitch. And we're going to repeat that across. So we're going to skip 2, half double crochet or V-stitch in the next stitch, half double, chain 1, and another half double in the same chain. Skip 2, V-stitch in the next chain. And we'll repeat that across the row. Eventually we'll get to a point where we have just 2 chains left. Join me when you reach that point. I just completed a V-stitch, and you can see I have 1 and 2 chains left on my chain here. So I'm going to skip the next chain and place a half double crochet in the last chain. So this is what my first row looks like. Let's move on to row 2. So row 2 is repeated throughout the rest of the back. It starts with a chain 2, which counts as our first half double crochet, and now we're meant to V-stitch in the chain 1 space of each V-stitch across. So if you think about the construction of your V-stitch, it's a half double crochet, a chain, and a half double crochet. So we're essentially putting V-stitches right here in the middle of the V-stitches from the previous row. So here's a half double, between them is a chain space, and that's where I'm going to insert my hook. I'm going to yarn over, pull up a loop in that chain space, yarn over, pull through all 3 to complete the half double crochet, chain 1, and now I'm going right back into that chain space for another half double crochet. Now I can move on to the next one. Here's a half double, and here's a half double. I'm going to yarn over, pull up that loop, yarn over, pull through all 3 for the first half double crochet, follow that with a chain, and half double crochet again in that chain 1 space. And we're going to repeat that across until we get to the next turning chain. If you have trouble finding your chain 1 spaces, just identify your half double crochets and pull them apart, and that chain 1 space is going to make itself a lot more obvious. So we just completed our last V-stitch here, and we need to find the second chain of our turning chain. So just like before, you can kind of massage and pull on your work a little bit to make that chain easier to find. I'm seeing 1 and 2 chains here, so I'm going to yarn over, pull up a loop in that second chain of the turning chain, yarn over, pull through all 3 to complete a half double crochet there. So this is what 2 rows of our V-stitch pattern looks like. We can do 1 more together. So again, that starts with a chain 2. We'll turn our work, and we're going to find that first V-stitch, which is right here. So I've yarned over already. I'm going to dip my hook down into the chain space of that next V-stitch, pull up the loop, yarn over, pull through 3, chain 1, and do another half double crochet in that same chain space. Head to the next one, half double crochet, chain 1, half double crochet again in the same space. On to the next one, half double crochet, chain 1, half double crochet again. And we'll repeat that all the way across until we get to our turning chain. I just wrapped up my last V-stitch, and now I need to place a half double crochet in the second chain of my turning chain. I'm going to yarn over, find that second chain, dip down into it, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, complete your half double crochet. So you'll continue in your V-stitch pattern until you achieve the number of rows as written in the pattern, and at that point you can fasten off, and we do not need to leave a long tail here. So something around 3 to 4 inches is plenty, just enough to weave in later. I actually have a little sample here of what my back piece that I'll be working with looks like, and now we can move on to the front panels. To give you a frame of reference, I wanted to show you an idea of what your front panels are going to look like. We'll start with just regular stitching here in our V-stitch pattern, and then we have 2 row repeats of our decrease section, and then we have a few flat rows here at the very top. So I'm again making a small sample, but imagine yours just kind of blown up in proportion, and that's what your front panels will come out looking like. So let's make them together. The front panels are broken up by size, so make sure you navigate to the size that you're making. You're going to begin with the chain amount that is recommended for your size. And once you've achieved the correct chain amount, we're going to hop right back into our V-stitch pattern. So I'm going to find the 3rd chain from my hook. So remember, the loop on our hook does not count as a chain. So we're going to find the 1st, 2nd, 3rd chain from the hook and V-stitch into that chain. Skip the next 2 chains, V-stitch in the following. Skip the next 2 chains, V-stitch in the following. And repeat that across until you have 2 chains left. I now have 2 chains left here, so I'm going to skip the next chain and half double crochet in the very last one. We're going to work in just even V-stitch rows for a period of time. Your size is going to tell you how far that should be, and then we'll get into the decrease section. So continue working your flat rows until you get to the special row where we'll begin our decreases. So I just finished my flat rows here at the bottom of my front panel. Now I need to move into my decrease rows. This is where having some locking stitch markers is going to come in handy. This locking stitch marker is going to help make sure you can always find your first half double crochet on your decrease row, and you'll see why that's going to be so important. For now, I'm just going to sit my locking stitch marker off to the side. I'm going to insert my hook, and at the beginning of that decrease row, it says to not chain. So I'm going to turn my work, but I am not going to chain here. Instead, I'm going to place a half double crochet in the chain one space of the first V-stitch, which is right here. So here's the half double, here's the other half double, here's the chain one space. I'm just going to place a half double crochet right here. Without a chain, I'm also skipping that half double crochet that's at the base of my chain, and it says in the pattern to mark this stitch. This is going to be important because we're decreasing along this edge, and marking the stitch is going to make sure we can find it later. And now we're going to jump right back into our V-stitch pattern. So we started with a half double crochet here. We're now skipping the rest of this V-stitch, and we're going to place a V-stitch in the chain one space of the next V-stitch. And we're going to do that all the way down the line until we get to our turning chain. We're at our turning chain, so I'll place a half double crochet in the second chain of that turning chain. So this is what that first row of our decrease looks like. Doesn't look a whole lot different, but if you notice, we've actually lost a V-stitch here, and that's how we'll get a nice slope along the front of our cardigan. So now we're going to chain two, turn, and continue in our V-stitch pattern until we get to that marked stitch. So I'm placing a V-stitch in the chain one space of the next V-stitch, and each one down the line. All right, so my last half double crochet is right here where this marked stitch is, and in the pattern it says to place a half double crochet in the marked stitch, and that ends our row. So for each of these two decrease rows, we're losing one V-stitch, which is exactly what we're going for. So I popped my marker out because now I'm going to turn my work, and the next couple rows are just worked evenly. You'll want to see what it says for your size of the pattern for how many even rows you'll work. But that starting chain two counts as my first half double crochet, and I'll V-stitch in the next stitch and each stitch across. And I'll work in that flat V-stitch pattern for as many rows as it says for the size until I get to another decrease row. So we'll practice that decrease row again together. So I did just a couple more rows, just a flat V-stitches, but you can already see that by skipping that stitch and kind of lessening our V-stitches, we're getting a nice slope in already, and that's just with one decrease so far. So let's do another decrease together. So remember, to start this, we are not going to chain. We're just going to turn our work, place a half double crochet in the chain space of the next V-stitch, which is right here. I'm going to drop my hook for a second to make sure I put in my locking stitch marker, and I'm just marking the top two loops of that half double crochet that I just made. And now I'm going to continue in my V-stitch pattern across the row. I've reached the end of my row, so I'm going to half double crochet in the top of that chain two, and turn my work. And I'm going to continue working in my V-stitch pattern until I get to my marked half double crochet. All right, I've worked all of my V-stitches across. I am now back at my marked stitch, so I'm going to place a half double crochet in that stitch, and I can pop out my marker. So you want to continue working in that decrease pattern as it's written in the pattern for your size, and eventually you'll get to a point where you're instructed to just work in your regular V-stitch rows. So continue on and finish both of your front panels, and join me when you're ready to work on the sleeves. Once you're ready, it's time to make the sleeves. All of the sleeve sizes start the same way. You're going to begin with a series of chains and then just work in flat rows of your V-stitch pattern. Then you're meant to jump to the size that you're making and continue in the pattern with the increase rows that are indicated there. So whereas before on the front of our panels, we worked decreases to kind of narrow in our panels, now we're going to work increases to increase the size of our sleeves. So we're working from the cuffs up to the shoulder. What I want to show you how to do here is the increase in the sleeve. You'll see under the notes section, an increase is a half double crochet, chain one, half double again, chain one, and half double again in the same space. So this is how that works. Once you're ready to start your increase, we're going to chain two, turn our work, and increase in the chain space of the first V-stitch. So here we're going to place a half double crochet, chain one, half double crochet again, chain one, half double crochet again. What that does is create two chain one spaces. So when we come back and work the other way, we'll place a V-stitch in each of these. So we're adding a V-stitch in each of those increase rows. For the remainder of that row, you'll just work in your V-stitch pattern across until you get to your turning chain, half double crochet in your turning chain. Then we'll chain two, turn our work in our V-stitch pattern until we get to that increased stitch. We can see it right here. We've got a half double, a chain, a half double, another chain, and a half double. So we just want to make sure we place a V-stitch in each of those chain one spaces. So here's the first one and the second one. We'll finish up with a half double crochet in the second chain of the turning chain. So we can see already by adding that V-stitch, it's already starting to curve outward. So our increases are only adding one V-stitch each time. One tip that I like to use at this point in the process is more stitch markers. I like to mark my increase rows. That way it's much easier to keep count of my rows. So you can easily go through the pattern for your size and see how many increases are planned. What I like to do then is pull out that number of stitch markers. So then that way I know that once I've used all my stitch markers that I've achieved all of my increases. So I'll show you an example of that. For the little sample that I'm working on today, I worked up both of my sleeves already. I was putting 5 increases on both of my sleeves. So I pulled out 5 stitch markers and placed them on my increase rows. So that way I knew once I used all of my stitch markers that I had achieved the number of rows I was meant to have. At the very top of your sleeve, there'll be a couple rows of V-stitches worked flat, and then you'll be instructed to fasten off. At this point, I have my 2 sleeves, I have my 2 front panels, and I have my back piece. You might be tempted to start assembly now, but I strongly recommend blocking while your stuff is in pieces. This is going to help a lot with the shape and drape of your piece, particularly considering that we're using acrylic yarn. Acrylic yarn is essentially plastic, so it wants to stay in the shape that it came in, but if you want to have a nice flowy cardigan that lays on you as opposed to kind of feeling quite stiff, I would block at this point. So I'm going to show you how I would block these pieces. Here I have my interlocking foam blocking mats. These ones are from Knit Picks and they have these great 1-inch grids on them. Place this down and I'm just going to do my front panels here, but you will want to block all 5 of the pieces that we've made so far. So with my front panel, I'm going to lay it down and pin it into place. All right, so I've got everything pinned down sufficiently. The size feels good to me. In the background, I was heating up my garment steamer. I have this link down in the description, and I really like this one because when you pull this little trigger here, it does continuous steam. So now I'm just going to gently steam down each of my pieces. I would do this for all 5 of my pieces. Just be careful not to get the plate of this steamer in contact with your pieces. The acrylic will melt. It is plastic, so don't do that. Instead, I'm hovering maybe an inch or 2 above the actual fabric. So that's probably just about enough. Just give it a feel, make sure everything is good and damp. Let that dry overnight if you can stand it, or at least for a few hours until it is completely dry. And then you can unpin it and we can move on to the next steps in assembly. Now that all of our pieces are blocked and beautifully drapey, we can start assembly. So we want to begin with our front panels and our back panel. So you're going to place the top of your back panel facing you, and then your front panels, just make sure that sloped section is up front here, just like this. And then we're just going to whip stitch these shoulder seams. So I'm going to use the tails that are left over from leaving a long tail when I fastened off. And I'm just going to whip stitch, stitch for stitch. Where it's coming out here, I'm going to dip down into the chain 2 space that's just underneath and start whip stitching. And then I'm going to go into the next stitch, which is a half double crochet here, and I'm going to go into the next half double crochet here on the back and whip stitch. into the next chain space and the chain space on the front panel, and whip stitch into the next half double crochet here and the next half double crochet here. This will keep everything nice and lined up and even. I've just got one last stitch here, which is going to go in the top of this chain 2 space. I always like to bring the tail around the front of the needle at this point to make a nice little knot. And then I'm going to weave in that end, and I just like to go right across that seam just so everything tucks in beautifully. I'll snip off that end. Now I'm going to whip stitch this shoulder seam as well, and then we can move on to the next step. Once the body is done here, we can move on to the sleeves. So we'll open our piece up just like this and rotate out to attach our sleeves. In the pattern, it'll tell you the width that this needs to be. So for the size small, for example, it says to seam the shoulder over 14 total inches. So you'll use this seam here as your midpoint. So you'll have 7 inches of sleeve on this side and 7 inches of sleeve on this side. I would just recommend grabbing some locking stitch markers, and once you've kind of got it positioned here to the width it needs to be, you can attach the stitch marker from the sleeve to the sweater to keep it in place. And then we can just grab a length of yarn. I usually like to measure out 1, 2, 3 lengths of yarn plus a little extra for good measure. I'll fasten that off and thread it onto my tapestry needle. Now I always like to start left to right because I'm left-handed. Going to insert into that stitch, grab a little piece of my back panel here, drop out my marker, pull that through, and I like to put a little knot here, leaving just enough tail to be able to weave in this end. And now I'll just continue on whip stitching my sleeve here, and then I'll repeat that for the other side as well, and then we'll move on to the next step of assembly. So we have one last set of seams to do. We'll want to fold our project with the wrong side out, so with the seam side showing towards us, just like this. How cute are you? Oh my gosh, it's adorable. Okay, and now we'll just want to seam up from the cuffs towards the underarm and down the sides. Same for the other side. So I'm going to do that off camera because that's easy peasy. I'm just going to whip stitch down this side and then down this side, weave in the rest of these ends, and then we get to add the beautiful collar and button band. I'll see you in a minute. All right, friends, we've made it. We're now at the point where we can flip everything to the right side facing us. So we're going to put our seams on the inside so that we can finally work the collar. So when I flip this, I'm also going to fold these teeny tiny little cuffs. Oh my gosh, it's so cute. It's so cute. It's so tiny and it's so cute. Now the collar is going to involve doing rounds going all the way up the body, around the opening, and around the entire back of the cardigan. This is going to allow us to create the button band, also beautifully finish off the neck opening, and also extend the length of our cardigan ever so slightly. So we're going to start with the right side facing, so you want the correct side of your cardigan facing out, and we're going to join at the center of the back neck. Now I will be doing this part in a different color just to make sure it's easier for you to see exactly where my stitches are going and the difference between the cardigan and the collar. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit and let's do this first round together. First thing you want to do is kind of find the center of your back neck. That part doesn't matter, like it does, you don't have to be specific about that. Just kind of grab an area and hop in there. So I'm going to insert my hook into the chain 1 space of one of these V stitches, yarn over, and pull up the loop. I'm now going to chain 1 and single crochet in that same space. So that is my join to begin my collar. Now I'm going to single crochet in each stitch and space until I get to the front panel. So that was right in the space. Now I need to single crochet in this half double crochet, single in the next half double, in the space, and in the next stitch. In the next half double, in the space, and in the stitch. All right, now we've made it to our front panel. So now we're about to start working into row ends. So for the row ends here, we want to work 1 single crochet in the next row, 2 single crochets in the following row, 1 single crochet in the next row, 2 single crochet in the following row. And that's because our row ends are about the height of a half double crochet stitch. So we're going to single crochet evenly down the line using this one single in the next row, two in the following row pattern. And now we're ready to rotate to work along the bottom edge. We're going to chain two and then rotate our work. So now along the bottom edge, we're just going to single crochet in each chain across. Now I will show you what I did for my original sample because I wanted to make sure I didn't have a lot of gapping in the holes down here. So what I did instead is I placed a single crochet in the base of the stitch, but then instead of working in this space for the chain, I actually picked up the space between the half doubles here. So I kind of went up a little bit to kind of close up that gap, and then single crochet in the base of the next chain. Single crochet in the base of the following chain. I'm singling up in the space of the next V-stitch and single in the following chain. Just make sure you keep a good count. Take your time here. This is an optional step as far as single crocheting up into the stitch, but as you can see, it maintains our V-stitch pattern and doesn't give us unnecessary holes and gaps at the bottom of our cardigan. So we'll repeat that all the way across the base of our cardigan until we're ready to work the next front panel. I made my way all the way along the bottom of my cardigan. Now I just need to finish up these last couple of stitches. Here at the corner, I'm going to chain two and turn my work. Just like before, I'm going to work one single crochet in the next row, two single crochet in the following row. So you can kind of orient yourself to figure out where your rows are, just to make sure you're placing your stitches properly. So I'm going to place one single crochet in the next row, two in the following row, one in the next row, two in the following row. I made it to the back of my cardigan again, where I can jump right back into single crocheting in each stitch and space across. So in the half double, in the space, and in the next half double. In the half double, in the space, and in the next half double. At this point, we've made it back around to the beginning of the round, so we've made it all the way around the cardigan. What a journey it's been. And then we're going to slip stitch into this first single crochet to complete the round. Let's take a quick look at our work. So you can see, especially with this contrasting yarn, what the start of our collar looks like here. Now we can move on to our next round. So this round is pretty simple. We're just going to work our single crochets in the back loop only around the work. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. We'll start with the chain one, and we'll want to work in the back loop of the same single crochet where we joined. When you're looking at a single crochet stitch, these are the two loops here at the top. So this is the front loop, and this is the back loop. We're working only through the back loop of our stitches. So I'm going to pop that hook back in. I've chained one, and I'm going to find the back loop of the stitch where I just joined and complete a single crochet. Back loop of the next stitch, back loop of the next stitch. And we're going to do that all the way around. When we reach our corners here at the bottom, we're going to, because remember we did a chain two here, we're going to single crochet, chain two, and single crochet again in that chain two space. And then jump right back into your single crochet through the back loop pattern. You're going to do that until you get back to this first single crochet, slip stitch through that, and then we can move on to round 3 of our collar. With the second round of our collar done, now we need to place markers so we can seat our buttonholes. You'll want to place likely at least 5 buttons on your cardigan. Decide which side you want your buttons to sit, and we're going to place our markers on the opposite side. So on the original pattern, the buttons sat on the left side, so I marked the right side. What I'm going to do is just evenly place my markers along the straight edge of my cardigan opening. I do not want to place markers here because they'll never stretch enough to get to the other side. I'm placing markers just here on this side. This does not have to be an exact science, just place your buttonholes wherever you want to. Now we're going to continue in our single crochet back loop until we get to our first marker. Once you get there, join me and I'll show you how we create this first round of our buttons. I've made my way around the cardigan and now I've made it to my first marked stitch, which is right here. So what I'm going to do to create the buttonhole is I'm going to chain 2. I'm going to skip this marked stitch, single crochet in the back loop of the next stitch, and each stitch until I get to the next marked stitch. Now I've made it to my next marked stitch. I'm going to chain 2, skip that stitch, single crochet in the following stitch, and each one to the next marked stitch. Just like before, I'm going to chain 2, skip that stitch, single crochet in the following stitch and just through the back loop, and now all of my marked stitches are accounted for, and you'll see I've created a buttonhole. But these buttonholes are actually a little too thin, a little too flimsy, so we're going to go around our cardigan a couple more times. So I'll finish this round and then continue in my single crochet through the back loop pattern until I make it back around to these buttonholes. And then I'll tell you what we'll do with these on our next round of the collar. We've got just a couple stitches until we get to our first buttonhole here, which is right here. So it's that chain 2 space. So I'm just going to single crochet into that space and then single crochet through the back loop of the next stitch and each of the following stitches until I get to the next buttonhole. Right through the back loop. Here's my next buttonhole, single crochet right into that space, single crochet through the back loop of each single crochet to the next buttonhole. Here it is. I'll single crochet here and then single crochet through the back loop to end this round. So we can see here that we're definitely starting to build up that button band, and we'll finish up this round, but then we'll do one final round of our single crochet through the back loop pattern. At that point we can fasten off and we'll do our finishing steps. Okay friends, we finished all of the rounds on our collar. So with this nice contrast, you can see exactly how that collar builds up. The front neck opening gives us a little bit of height on the back collar and also a bit of length to our cardigan. So the last things we need to do are our finishing steps, first of which starts with attaching our buttons. Our first step is to grab a length of our yarn, and I'm going to thread that onto my tapestry needle, and then I'm just going to kind of fold my collar, even up the bottom edges, and that's going to show me where my buttons need to go. I've got another tapestry needle, so I'll use that. I'm going to find my top button hole, and I'm just going to kind of poke my tapestry needle through there, and now I can see exactly where my button needs to go on this side. So I'm going to grab my button and I'm going to place it right over this third row of my button band, right in this space. Now I'm going to go from bottom to top through my holes, and my button only has 2 holes, so I'm going to go up, and as I come up I'm going to move that button around and make sure it's centered, because as I go down it's going to seat that button and it's going to stay wherever I put it now. So I'm going to go through here just like that. And I'm going to go through twice just to make sure that button is nice and secure. And then I can go on the back, tighten everything down, and double knot it. And while I'm here, I'm going to thread the other end onto my tapestry needle and weave in this end. And then we'll notice that that button slips right through our buttonhole. Oh my gosh, it looks so cute. So we'll want to repeat that all the way down our button band for however many buttons you've decided to put on your sweater. After that, we'll want to weave in any remaining ends, fold the sleeves, which I couldn't help myself, I did it already, and then steam block the rest of our cardigan as necessary. I think it would be a good idea to just lay this flat and steam block it, focusing on all of our seams here and also giving it a good steam around the collar just to make sure everything lays nice and flat. You can either either do this flat or you can put it on a mannequin or a hanger and steam it that way. When you steam it that way, it allows everything to kind of fall and settle a little bit, so it does aid in the drape of your finished piece. But ultimately, your Tony cuffed cardi, oh my gosh, I can't get over how cute this is. Your Tony cuffed cardi is all done. I am so stinking proud of you. I can feel in my bones that you did a fantastic job, and I hope this is the first of many crochet garment patterns that you're going to try. Thank you so much for joining me for this tutorial, and I'll see you for the next one real soon.